Yep, it's ready to go.
How about that?
I'm not I'll work together, Dr. David, but yes, you do that.
I'm jealous.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
Monday.
Okay, while we're signing in, I'm very thankful that you're all here. This subject is, it's a subject that I really enjoy. When I was younger, a long time ago, I remember learning things off of records and just having my ear glued to the speaker. And there was no way for anyone to tell me what it was that I was doing and how music worked. And I just learned chords kind of like just by rote. And then I would go in my band and play them and play guitar. But I never really understood what it was that was going on. And what I would like to do here is just kind of like, on a fairly elementary basis, just to explain to you what our system of harmony is and what our system of music theory is. Everybody knows, I mean, we're all in this class together, so we love music. We have something in common. We enjoy music. And I just, for me, the mechanics of it is very important because of what I just explained my history was. And for a person like me, I need to understand what it is that I'm doing so that I can extrapolate from that and I can take it. For instance, like if I would learn like a lick or a figure or a riff in one key, I wasn't able to translate that in another key because I didn't know really what I was doing. So hopefully this class is going to give you the tools with which you can actually learn how to harmonize. Even if you're not a instrumentalist, if you're a singer, it's going to give you the tools to understand. And what's most important about this, I think, is that it's going to be able to let you communicate your ideas to each other. Music is communication. It's a very, very beautiful but abstract way of saying something. When you listen to music, people get different feelings from it. I happen to love classical music. When I listen to classical music, I'm transported. It's my desert island music. But I love all other kinds. I love funk music. I love rhythm and blues. I love rock. I really love rock. I love playing it. I love playing heavy music. All of that. And I love jazz. So, and all of those things speak differently to each one of us. They say something different. So having said that, I'm going to tell you that music is a language. And in order to be able to really communicate that language, you have to understand the fundamentals of what music is. So just like we learn words, we learn phonetics, we learn the alphabet, we need to, if we really want to understand music, we need to understand the language that it's written in. And for us, it's written in scale tones. Now we have a system of 12 notes which is called the chromatic scale. And what that is that starting on the note C, is everybody comfortable, like if I just say, sort of the camera, Sophia, up here. Like, I'm going to have you play the chromatic scale. This is what the chromatic scale, starting on C, sounds like.
Chromatic?
Yes. That's all we have to work with. It's 12 notes, but what you can do with those 12 notes is mind-boggling. And we're not even near exhausting a fraction of what we can do with all of that. But that's where this class is going to come in, and where you're going to understand the building blocks of music and what it is that makes our system what it is. There are other systems, like there's types of Indian music that have more than 12 notes in the scale. Or you can actually do quarter tones and you're bending. But we don't normally write our music down that way. You can notate a quarter note bend or whatever, a 30-second note bend, you can notate that. But our system basically relies on those 12 notes. You don't see 12 notes here because the next thing that I'm going to talk to you about is what we call a scale. The scale's like a ladder. And so a ladder is these notes, like, and if anybody at all knows anything about the piano, These are the notes that comprise a C scale. So play C scale. Kind of back down. Testing. So everyone's familiar with that, right? That sound is something that we've all heard, we all know that. That's a musical scale. And what else what that scale is what I wrote down right here. They're steps in music. When you heard the chromatic scale, you heard each note going up by a half step. So each note followed one of the other notes by a half step, from C to C sharp, from C sharp to D, from D to D sharp, from E to F sharp to G sharp, and so on. Those are going up by half steps. What we have here in the scale, there's a formula here for how we derive the scale, and the W here means whole step. So instead of a half step, you're going from C to D, which is a whole step, from D to E, a whole step, from E to F, a half step, a whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And what that tells me, and should tell you, is that this is the formula for any scale that you want to make in our system. If you wanted to start this on C sharp, I won't make you do that, but if you wanted to start this on C sharp, it would have the same formula as this. Go ahead. Okay, so what Sophia just did, she demonstrated, she played, the first thing that she played was the chromatic scale, and she played the C major scale, and she played a C sharp scale, which is these are all major scales, by the way, and I'm going to explain that in a minute, and then she played the D major scale. So the formula for that is stepwise. And when we talk about scales, we're talking about steps. We're talking about scales on a ladder, walking up. So you have a whole tone, which means that there's a whole tone between C and D, not C to C sharp, but C to D, then D to E, not D sharp, not D to D sharp, but D to E. So those are two whole steps. Then you have a half step, another whole, another whole, another whole, and then a half. And that's how we comprise the major scale. That is, in any music with any scale that you do, that is the formula for the scale. So if you started on F, it's the same formula. It's the whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If you started on G sharp, it's the same thing. It's always the same thing. So, now, that's a scale. That is music that is being played in a horizontal manner. So you're seeing da 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 da, and it's going across this way. Now what makes music so beautiful, and one of the elements of it, and where theory really comes in, is that there's a horizontal aspect to music. And the horizontal aspect is that you can stack notes on top of each other. And that's where harmony comes in. So the thing that is always the most daunting for people when they want to get into music is to understand, well, what's this thing about harmony? I mean, how do I even go about, trying to make sense of it, which was me when I was learning. I mean, I could play a few chords, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what their relationships were with each other. So what harmony is, I'd like to explain it this way because this is the way it makes most sense to me, is harmony is notes that are in relationship with each other. So, for instance, like if I have this note, and I'm going to stay with C because it's the easiest scale to work with. If I play a C note, now what happens if I add another note, and I'm not going to even tell you what note this is, but if I add this note, you hear that notes playing together with that, and I add this one? What happens if I add this one? Right? Or this one? But this note is still singing. But the notes that are around it are contextualizing it. So, in this case, oh, that sounds happy. That's like a nice, and it is. It's a major third. So that's a happy sound. What happens if I do this? It becomes sad, right? we've learned to quantify sounds that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that every time you hear a minor chord it makes you sad. But it's a way for us to figure out that's the relationship there. There's a major relationship, there's a minor relationship. There's other relationships too we're not going to talk about right this very moment. But if I play the C, and then I play the E, wow, all of a sudden this C doesn't, that sounds like it's in a vacuum. It just doesn't. And this makes it sound even less in a vacuum. Now this one. You hear that sound? It's kind of like, it wants to do something, just like this one. It wants to go here, maybe it wants to go up to here, or here, or here. But see, the note itself, that's always staying a C. It's all, whatever you're doing, is that note right there is still being played. So what harmony does, which is so beautiful, is that it contextualizes the notes that we have. So when we're singing in choir, when we're doing a choir piece, we have times when we're all singing the same thing. But then we have times when we're not all singing the same thing. We're singing different things. We're singing notes that are, my pitch is different than your pitch, but when we do it, it sounds beautiful. So that's, the harmonic aspect of music is one of the, initially the most daunting ones, but it's also one of the most beautiful ones. So, like I said, just to recap, we have the scale version of music, which is the horizontal aspect of it, and then we have the vertical aspect of it, which is notes on top of each other. So what I'm going to explain to you right now, and this is probably be something good to write down if you have something to write with, is our system is called triadic. And what that means is that our notes and our chords are based on thirds. And if you look at the scale right here, I wrote the numbers above them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now, so what does that mean? So it means that if I wanted to construct a chord, and for, even if you don't play an instrument, this will help you make chords if you want to do that. And you can actually do that on an app on your iPhone if you want. You can make these chords. What that means is that triadically, we go in thirds. So the next note from C would be what? If we're going up in thirds. Yes. And what's the note after E if we're going up in thirds? Right. So those three notes, C, E, G, could you play this? Sorry, did it. Yeah. And then play them together. That's a C chord. That's a C major chord. So we, as a class now, we have constructed our first chord, which is that. So what I'm going to show you right now, that's a C major chord. And the reason that it's C major, we're starting with what's called the root note. And the root note is, the chord is named after C, so we know that C is the anchor note for that. That doesn't mean that we can't start a C chord on either of these two notes, because you can do that. That's called inverting it, but we're not going to do that right now. Right now we're going to stay in root position. And when you're in root position and in closed harmony, where the next note follows the next one logically, we have this interval right here, and that is the interval of a major third. So Sophia, could you play C to E chromatically? Play it chromatically. That. So we have 2 whole steps there, 4 half steps that get us up to there. That's very important to know, because the first interval, when building a chord from root position, has to be the interval of a major third. And it's called major because there's something also called minor, which is if, go do that again and stop on E flat. Now play those 2 notes together. See, that's a minor third. I'll play the major third. You hear the difference? There's a qualitative difference between sad. I'll just say that, just to overly simplify it. That's a sad sound. Major. Now play all 3 notes of the C minor. And all 3 notes of C major. See? So right away that we've made, just through this scale system, we found out that if we lower this by a half step, we're making a minor chord. We keep everything the same, so that this relationship the interval of a major third, and then this relationship, which is the interval of a minor third, constructs a chord called a major chord. Just stop me if that's, I'm happy to explain any of this. Everything is mathematical about what we're explaining here. So that your first interval step here, right there, and this one have to be in relationship with each other. Now, oh yes.
Can you ask her to do the D minor against the difference?
Oh, the C and the E? Yeah, could you play the, just,
C minor.
C minor.
Right, C minor.
yeah.
So C major is the happy sound. This. Very bright. C minor. Very sad. A little darker, right? C minor.
And there's the simple formula, it's sort of like, I mean, I was just thinking about that, like, you know, I mean, it's like for children, if you know, either having a boy or a girl, there's just a slight chromosomal difference between the two. And in this music, in this chord, there's just a slight one. It's just here. If you're, instead of going a major third on the first interval here, if you went a minor third, all of a sudden you have a completely different chord. So you have a C major and you have a C minor. So now, let's go, and what I'm going to show you right now is I'm going to show you, out of all of this, how we're going to harmonize this scale. And we're going to harmonize it in thirds. So the next one, I'm going to ask you, if we start here on the note D, what's our next note for making a chord? And then, play that, please. Okay, now this is going to illustrate what I just told you about. This interval between D and F is what? It's a minor third. Right? So, and we're all doing this because our system of music dictates that this is how our scale works right here. So this, and then that to this, is a major third, from F to A. That's a major third. So to construct a minor chord, you start with your root note, which is D. You go a minor third from D to F, and then you go a major third to A, and that gives you D minor. So, what this is telling us about our major scale is that the first chord is a major chord in your chord scale. And I think this is important for us to know, and stop me if any of this is puzzling or I'm not making it clear enough. The second chord, D, is minor. So when we're going up our chord scale right now, we're starting with C, we've got the happy C sound. So Sophia, could you play C and then D minor, one after the other? Now, I want to show you something that was like, I couldn't believe it when I finally figured this out, and it's as simple as what I'm just going to explain to you. What Sophia just played was, she's playing all of these notes, and actually chords are just, they're scale tones on top of each other. So she started here and played those three, and then she started here, but we're still in the C scale. So everything that's happening is still happening in the C scale. And if you went up, see what she's doing, she's playing the C to the D, which is to D, and then she's playing the D to the E. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say here, and I hope I'm not making this crazy difficult, she's actually playing scales. As she's playing the chord, play the chords, up to the next one. Do you see how each note are those, like the D, F, so the C, E, G, the C is going to D, the D is going to E, the E is going to F, the F is going to G, like that. That's all that's happening. Oh, I know.
Because we can't see what she's playing.
Oh, yeah, she's just playing, if you can imagine it, her fingers are playing the C, E, and the G, and then they're playing the D, F, and the A. But you see how they're going just like that, right up the scale like that. And that's all that harmony is. That is harmony simplified. Now, you're not going to walk out of here and you know everything there is to know about harmony, because it's obviously a complex subject. But this is the building blocks right here. So when you're moving chords up the scale, you're also moving them like this. You're not only moving them horizontally, you're moving them vertically. So that's a really important concept to think about. That I'm not only, if I were just playing the scale, I'd be playing each one of these notes by itself. But when we're doing chords like what Sophia just did, you're playing blocks of notes, but they're also succeeding each other. So our next one will be this one. So what's the third after this one? Try it. And then B. So play. What's that quality of sound? What does that sound like? It's minor. So now we're at the point where we go, okay, so we have the C scale. So that's major, that's minor, because this dictates everything that we just did. And we're going to stay within this rule because that's the rule for our scale, our C major scale. So now, Sophia, just play C, D, and E in chords. Another way that if you wanted to look at it, since this is all the C scale, she could be starting the C, the E, and the G, and then the D, the F, and the A. She's starting those. She's actually playing a C scale, but starting on different notes of the C scale. That's how interrelated all of these are. So if I were to say right now, this would be the major. This is 1 major, 2 minor, 3 minor. Now let's go to F. And if you also notice, there's numbers on top of here. So that's the 4th chord tone in a C major scale. That's the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. And again, I'm using C major. This works over any scale, but C major is easy because visually it's all the white keys starting on C, going up to the octave. The octave just means that it's C doubled at twice the frequency. So C, D, E, F. So let's go to F. What's that interval? F to A is what? Yes, A to minor. So play that. So you can tell right away that's a major chord. Now, yes, sure.
Clarify for me, so it becomes a minor because of the half note it's in? Or
The interval, it becomes a minor, like, let's take D for example. It becomes a minor because this step is a whole and a half step instead of 2 whole
right,
steps.
okay, okay.
Is that clear? I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just saying 4 half. I'm trying to make it mathematical. But that's why that's a minor interval, because it's a whole step and a half step, not 2 whole steps. 2 whole steps make up a major interval, the major third. A whole and a half makes the minor third. And the order that they are determines what the chord quality is. And when I say quality, I mean major, minor, whatever. So C, D, E, F. So could you play all 4 of those? See? It sounds pretty, right? It's just, and I mean, if you have that knowledge right there, you could write hundreds of songs just knowing that. I mean, that's just, those are 4 chords. And they're not even, we haven't even covered the really, really big one, which is the next one. And I'll explain to you why it's a really, really big one. But these all have relationships to each other. So this, and then this, and you'll also notice, I mean, if you keep going in thirds, that's where you start creating your bigger harmonies. When you start stacking thirds on top of each other. I'm not going to elaborate this point right now, but I'm just saying what this is that if you follow along in thirds, so Sophia, just play this, play C major 7. That note is the next note in the third, so play that. So now you have another chord, another beautiful sound that's built on thirds. So everything that we're doing is built on thirds. So now we have C, D, E, F, and in music, like when you're an instrumentalist or even when you're a vocalist, if you hear somebody saying, well, play the 2 there, or play the 1 there, play the 5, that's all these numbers, because we quantify chords by their numbers. And if you know the scale well enough, You'll know that if somebody says, go to the 5, you'll know to play a major. Or go to the 4, you'll know to play a major. If you go to the 2, you're going to play a minor. If you go to the 3, you're going to play a minor. So you know those things. And because if you know that scale, all of that information is already available to you. And it doesn't matter what scale you use, it'll always be the same. So now we're going to move up to this guy, and that's the 5. And in our scale system, the 5 is what's called the dominant chord. And I'm going to explain this one to you because it's really, really important. This chord, the 5, is the one that always is pulling back home. Whenever you get to here, this guy wants to go home. Okay, so look, when we call in a musical cadence, which is usually a 5-1, could you just play that just for a second, before I even describe G? You hear that? You hear how that pulls? And that in all of music, this chord right here is the one that can take the most embellishing, alteration, or anything that you want to throw at it. Because it's always pulling to this one. And so let's just play the G, B, and the D. What's the quality of that? Play the chord. What's that quality? Major. So we're starting again. We have 1 is major, 2 is minor, 3 is major. Oh, sorry. 4 is major. In my harmony it is. And 5. Okay. Now let's move up to 6. What's that interval? Major or minor?
Minor.
And what's the next one from C then? Yes, that's right. We loop back around. And that's the next one. So play that one. Minor. So, one of the things that I'd like you to do as we're doing all of this is also to hear in the scale what the chord qualities are of each number of the scale as it goes up. So that in the first one, in C major, we know that that's a major sounding chord, that the 2 is a minor sounding, 3 is a minor sounding, 4 is a major sounding, 5 is major sounding, 6 is what? Minor. Okay, now here's the funniest. This one is what I would call the runt of the litter. It's a chord because we have to follow what we're doing here. This chord, play this one, Sophia. So B, what's the next interval? What's the one after that? What quality is that? Play them all together. We haven't heard this one yet, right? So the 7th degree in a scale has this weird sounding chord. It's called a diminished chord. It's also called a leading tone chord because it leads to here. Play that again, Sophia, and put G in the bass. See, all of a sudden, this is the other thing that I wanted to share with you just as far as relationships go with the notes. What Sophia just did is she put this 5 in the bottom of that chord, and all of a sudden, it's this chord, but it's got that triad on top of it. It's got that diminished triad on top of it, and that's what's called a 7th chord, which you just played. That's a dominant chord, it's a 7th chord. So it's G, B, D, and then it's also B, D, F. So what you have is these going like this, and then to the F. So that ends us up onto this 5 chord here that has that 7th note in it. And I know that let me explain it again. It has this, 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 and then what's the next one up?
F.
Right. That note right there in the G chord is what makes that chord sound like a dominant 7th chord, because that's that note right there. Can you play it again, Sophia? And then go to C. So that chord, the 5 chord right there, is related very, very closely to this chord. And you will find out in harmony that on every third on the chord, they're all very closely related. So if you're talking about not wanting, let's say for instance I'm writing a song and it's like C and then this, you know, then it goes to a G and then it goes back to a C. If I want to throw something in different instead of going back to the C, I can go to this chord, E minor. And the reason is, if you look at it, look what they share. They're almost this, they share two notes together. If you made them. So play a C and an E minor. Now E minor. So it has those two notes in common. So you could substitute. Instead of playing the C, you could play that E minor. And the same thing goes with D minor and F. F major and A minor. Because they actually share two notes in the chord together. So what I'm trying to say to you about this is how interrelated all of this is. For right now, what I would really want you to do is just to know what the quality of each of these chords is. So let's go through that again, Sophia. We'll start with C, and D, and again, if you took each one of those notes that she played, if you took the root note, you'd get this scale. You see where I'm going with this? If you took the root note out, she would be playing that scale, even with the chords. If she's moving up, her lowest note would be doing this. Just like every other note, as she approaches the next note, would be going up scale-wise. So she's actually playing chords like a scale. So there's really no difference other than that this doesn't have harmony, and what she played with the chords does have harmony. Does that make it clear? I mean, we all learn like in different ways. To me, it made so much sense when I realized that as we were moving up the chord scale, that we're not only moving like the single notes up there, but we're moving each note in the next chord up, so that's what's creating the harmony. Like if you could see Sophia's fingers when play the next
We
one.
want to show the scale at the same time.
Yes.
So I can add
Yeah.
two of
Okay.
these lower play scale.
Okay. So what she's doing is she's playing a scale with notes layered on top of it. That's all that I want you to glean from that. If you get that much from it, you're way ahead of the game, because that's all a scale system is. It's a way for creating chords. Now, obviously, C major is not the only scale that we have. We have lots of different scales. But this is the one that it's fundamental to understand before we can move on. Is there any questions up to this point? No, go ahead. Anything. Yes.
The last C represents the beginning of
Yes.
the next octave.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Sure. So it's a funny word, octave, because I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because October's the 10th month, you know, but anyway, that's all it means. Yes. And if you were to look at it frequency-wise, it's twice the frequency of what this is. So when you get to that, and it's that, you can tell. Can you play the octave? Just play them individually. That's an octave. So in between that, all of those notes fit in there. So I've written them down here too. This is kind of like the standard notation that we use. You don't even have to, with C, you don't even have to write major. If you just write C, it's understood to be major. D, always put like a little M next to it, so that we know it's minor. E minor, yeah. G. B diminished. This is the one everyone's gonna love. But it can't help itself. It's just following the formula. It's going from B to D to F. But what happened there is that we have two minor thirds together. So if I were to say, like chord construction-wise, our major chord is made up from the root, is made up from a major third and a minor third. The minor chord's made up of a minor third to a major third, and the diminished is two minor thirds. So now I want to just go just briefly over the next section, which is everybody at least kind of clear on that? Because I don't really want to move on unless I really, really want this to be understood, because it will help immensely, like, as far as like for communication and understanding. And one of the things that I found for myself that was the best thing to do is to listen to a lot of music and just try to, even at an elementary level, try to determine whether you're listening to a major chord or a minor chord. Or if it's something you don't know right now, just say, oh, that's the one I don't know. But that one, that next one, yeah, that one. And can you just play 1, 4, and 5 chord-wise? How many songs have been written just those 4 chords? 3 chords, actually. And then maybe throw in the 6 minor every now and then. Which we do all the time. Right.
I got a question.
Okay.
I understand the majors and the minors, but those numbers on top again?
Yes. Yeah, right. The numbers are just scale degrees. So the second scale degree from C is D, the third scale degree is E, the fourth is F, the fifth is G, the sixth is A, and the seventh is B. In that relationship. And the reason that I chose this particular scale is that if you'll notice, if you know anything about music at all, it doesn't have any sharps or flats. What sharps or flats do is they alter pitches. If you're, let's say if I started this in D, start the scale in D. So yeah. So, she played 2 notes that went out. In order for us to follow this formula, she had to change 2 notes. And one of the notes she had to change would be this one, so that we keep this intact, and she had to change this one. So all that means is that if you were reading music and you saw something, the sharp note looks like this. It's like a hashtag. So what that means is that since she was starting on D, in order to keep this relationship, she had to alter 2 of the notes. And in the key of D, it happens to be the note F sharp and C sharp. So when you're looking at that on a scale, you're seeing that there's an F sharp and then there's a C sharp in the key signature. That lets you know that this is your home key right here, not this anymore. If you didn't have a sharp or a flat here, you would know that you would probably be in the key of C.
So we're moving to a D scale?
Yes. Yeah, which you just, it's a D major scale. So if I were to write that here, that would be this. So in order to keep all of these relationships like that, you would have to do this, so that there would still be a major, that this interval would be whole, half, like that. That's why you do it. That's the only reason that sharps and flats are introduced in music. It's not to make everybody's life miserable. You know, create 5 or 6 sharps, which guitar players are notoriously bad about. We don't like to read in flat keys. Piano players don't necessarily like to play in sharp keys. We play in sharp keys because sharp keys are almost all the open strings of the guitar. Like E is 4 sharps, A is 3 sharps, D is 2 sharps, G is 1 sharp, B is 5 sharps, and then you're back to E again. So that's one of the reasons that guitars tend to gravitate toward sharp keys. Piano players, I don't know why they gravitate toward flat keys. Yeah. Well, they're always, piano players are always much more educated than
I got another question.
Yes.
I'm so close.
Okay.
I'm terrible at math, I always have been, and this is just like math, so I'm gonna get it. So this WWH, WWWH,
Yes,
that's for every scale,
yes.
every scale.
That is the formula for a major scale.
Okay, so
Yes,
So
for
like-
a major scale. yes.
when you say half, are you talking about those 12 notes?
Yeah, well, the 12 notes went up in half steps. Right?
All of them?
Yes, everything. In other words, this is an 8, it's actually a 7-note scale with the octave, but the first scale that you played is a chromatic scale, that's all 12 notes of the scale. So between these, if you notice, there's a C sharp. It's not in our major scale, there's a D sharp. There's nothing between these two, that's already a half step. Right.
There's nothing between E and F.
That's right. That's already a half step. And then between F and G is a whole step, so there's an F sharp there, there's a G sharp there, there's an A sharp there, and again, and between
All
D
right.
and C, there's nothing.
Maybe if you, all right, let's do those 12 notes again.
Okay,
Maybe I'm
so-
missing notes.
Yeah, like,
All right.
here, let me give you that. That's them, right there.
Oh, yeah,
So that's all of the 12 notes
right.
going up chromatically.
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah,
All right, so when you're trying to fit the next scale into that formula, you just have to add like a sharp.
that's right. Because you have to make sure that this is represented. This formula, whole tone, half, whole, half, has to be the major scale. It's different for different scales. I mean, like a minor scale, that's a different formula. We're concentrating on
We need one
yeah.
formula at a time.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah.
I only play major happy songs.
Okay. You're in luck with the scale.
Good.
So yeah, so does that kind of explain to you, like key signature wise, what's going on? Like if I, let's say I wanted to switch to the key of G, which is, if you look at it, it's 5 steps away. But if I started on G, everything, if I start on G, I have G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The only thing that I have to change here, the only relationship that is weird here is this one. That has to be an F sharp in order to fulfill this formula. You have to change whatever note chord tone you start on. If you start on E, you start on F, you start on A, whichever note, it has to fulfill that formula right there. And if it doesn't, then you have to change something. In this instance, since I had to change that to F sharp, you will have 1 sharp in the key of G. So if you look at a musical score and you see 1 sharp in the key signature, you know that it's in G, because G has that 1 sharp on F, because that has to be a half step, has to be. And then you can extrapolate all the other ones from that. If you started on E, if you had an E major scale, I can just tell you this because I know it, it'll have 4 sharps in it. A will have 3 sharps in it. C will have 5. You don't have to memorize any of this stuff, but it's all mathematical. Let's say you went home and you say, I want to know what an A scale, like an A major scale is. If you did this, like that, and you did it with this formula, which is whole, half, whole, half, between them, you would be able to find it out. And it'd be especially easy if you had a keyboard that you could do that on. Because all of us know what the major scale sounds like. You'll know when you make a mistake on the major scale. But if you don't, all you have to do is, can you play a whole step from C to D? Now play a half step. That's a half step. And then play C to D again. Whole step. Play D to E. Whole step. Play E to F. No, half step. E to F. See that right there? That's a half step. There's no note in between there. F to G. Whole step. Whole step. Whole step. Oh, half step. From B to C. B to C is half step. Right. Does that make sense? Okay, so, anyway, for like what I would do, like lesson-wise, if you wanted to go any further with this, is I would just start with your next, like C, D, E, F, G, start with each one and try to use this formula right here and see where that lands you as far as making the scale. We've already done the D, so you know that one. The E will have 4 sharps in it, and the reason it'll have 4 sharps is that, again, it's got to satisfy all of this criteria right there. Yes.
So, okay, I think I get the formula. What I'm not hearing is the difference between a major and a minor. Like, from just listening, I can't have it yet figured out.
Okay.
What-
Chord-wise or
Chord-wise.
interval-wise?
Chord-wise.
Okay. So play a C minor.
C minor?
C.
Major. Minor would be.
You don't hear the chord
I hear-
quality difference between those two?
Oh, I hear difference, but I'm not sure if I hear the difference that makes it major versus minor.
How about if we add like melodies though? That's major.
Change it to minor. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. She's just actually just arpeggiating that chord, which means that she's breaking it up into its individual notes, so you're hearing that alongside with the harmony that she's playing.
Okay. Okay.
It's like on guitar, like if I play. To me, that's kind of a melancholy sound as opposed to. You hear that?
Right.
Difference there?
Yes.
So that's a good point, because I'm probably not in the minority here, but I have to be able to quantify the sound. I have to be able to know if it's a major sound or if it's a minor sound. And we also, today we learned one other sound, which is diminished, which is a sort of an unfinished sound. It has that quality to it, like it wants to go somewhere. The other chords that we've been playing don't necessarily, they can sort of stand on their own, but that one wants to go somewhere. And it's also because it's the leading tone, which just means the B wants to pull to the C. Just like the G wants to pull to the C, so does the B, the G chord. So I just want to, just not to overload you or anything, but what we did here was we were working in a, I'm going to recap a little bit, we're working in a triad system. So we're working in thirds. So that's 3 away, 3 away, 3 away, and then you start, when you start here, you can still keep going 3, it sort of loops on itself. So now what happens if we add another 3 onto our chords? This is, and we'll stop after this, but what happens there on the C, we've already played this chord. We went to here, we went to here, and then what's our next note? Okay, can you play that again? Okay. That in music speak is called a major 7. And that has a particular kind of sound to it. It's a very, to me, it's kind of like a jazz sound. And jazz music is based a lot upon extended harmony, which means that you're not, most jazz musicians, unless they're just playing a fragment of the chord, would never just play a C triad or a D. They just don't do it. You kind of amplify on that, and all you do to amplify on it is you just go up to another third. So if you did that in the key of D, what would be your next note? If you went D, F,
C.
right, so play that. D minor 7. So play C major 7 to D minor 7. Now go up to D. Right. It sounds very kind of peanuts-ish, you know, yeah. It's nice. So all of a sudden, we're in a, just from those notes, they're all notes from the C scale, because you're listening to them together, and when you're hearing them together, you're creating something that's different. But it's still a C. A C major 7, you could play that in any song. It might not work contextually, because most rock songs you wouldn't want to be hammering away on a C major 7. It's just, it has a different kind of flavor to it. But you wouldn't be wrong to do that. That note is in the scale, you can play it, it works. But it just, what I'm trying to say is that different sounds evoke different things. Like when I hear a C major chord, I think it's it evokes something completely different to me than when I hear a C major 7 or a D minor 7. So play the next one, which would be, what's our next guy? We loop around? Yeah. Okay, play those three together. Doesn't it already sound kind of jazzy to you? I mean, it does to me. Just adding that extra interval in there just makes it. Can you make it swing a little bit? It's just, you know, it's like you're you know, watching a trio perform. That's the sound. So we can use these raw materials. What's that?
It's to it.
So it's you can use this material to make anything. I mean, we make heavy metal music out of this form. We can make jazz out of it, we can make country and western music. A lot of it has to do with the way it's done, the approach to it, the sound that you use to do it. But this is fairly immutable. You don't change this. This stays the same. It's always the same. If you heard choral music, like for some of us that are in the choir, choral music, and you would hear that chord sung, you'd think, well, I've never heard anything like that. But if you synthesized it down to the piano, that's what we're doing. We've sung those chords before. We've sung a C major 7, we've sung a D minor 7, a D minor 7. It's all there. So go to F.
Those are the ones that are hard to hit.
That's right, yeah, especially the major 7s are hard to hit, yeah, because you hear that one? That's, again, it's a major, but now it's F major 7. Let's just move on quickly to the next one. That one's different. That's the one that I told you. This is another sound that would be very good for you to get inside of your head. It's called the dominant 7th sound. Dominant 7th as opposed to major 7th. What we call in music, when we're talking about it, we call it the flat 7th. This is a group of sounds that's different than anything else. Play it again, please. And can you play just the B and the F? The reason it's different is because of that interval, which is, it's still fine. It's this interval right here. That's what makes the dominant 7th chord really, really weird. It's called, what we call in music, you don't have to remember this, it's called a tritone. It's an interval that was not allowed to be used in the Middle Ages because they thought it was the devil's music. Yeah. Right. Perfect, can you go between the perfect 5th and flat 5? You hear the difference? It's like a horror movie, right? Yeah. So it's that sound, it's that interval, that flat 5 interval that resides in every dominant 7th chord that makes that chord different than the other ones. It's what we call the dominant 7th sound. Can you just go like a lot of R&B music, a lot of funk music uses, maybe I should say. This way you'll be able to hear, you know, qualitatively the words are perfect sound. It's like, you hear that? That sound? That's the second. Or if I want. That's a dominant sound. It's got this. If I were to play major, listen to the sound difference. All of a sudden, you can't do that with this chord. The reason it's dominant in the key of C is because it's got the B. It doesn't have this, which is the major seventh. That's this. And when I'm going to throw one more word at you, is diatonic, which means that diatonic harmony is any of the notes that reside in this particular scale. So everything that we've created tonight, chord-wise, is diatonic. It all resides in this scale. There's no notes that we borrowed from another scale to make a chord. We use only the raw material from this scale. So that's what diatonic means. Chromatic, if you remember, meant each individual chromo color. That means everything's represented in the chromatic scale. So diatonically, that's how we created this. So when I say something's diatonic, it means that it's using all the notes of the particular scale that we're in. So the G chord here, if we go and we add that extra third on there, it becomes a dominant seventh chord, and it's also diatonic. So the 5 chord, the dominant seventh chord in any scale system is diatonic to the chord scale. We didn't have to borrow to make it that. It just so happens that that note, which is the 7th note in this, I don't want to confuse you, it's the 7th note of the G chord. It's not the 7th note of the C scale. It's the 7th note of the G chord. Is a flattened 7th. It has that sound. It has on the G7, instead of this, that's this sound. Hear the difference? Like the Beatles used to use that a lot. They would go, right? So they're kind of just, that's all they're doing with the melody. And the chord behind it, they go from the major 7 to a flat 7. So I just that sound. Blues, and it's all about 7th chords. This note, it's a 7. You wouldn't want to do this. It doesn't sound right. So, and just use that. Just use those kind of examples to quantify the different kinds of sounds, so that you know this. It sounds happy to me. It's all major chords. Everything's wonderful. This has a different feeling. To me, it sounds different. It's a little bit like Sophia said. It's a little darker sounding. Nothing bad about it. It's just it's the shading is different. And then if you see this guy, that's our diminished chord right there. Wanting to go somewhere. That's a quantifiable sound. And then our 7th sound. Is it this? Is that helpful? And so so each chord, like, and when we're talking about chord scales, we're talking about, like if somebody says to me, okay, play a 2-5-1. Now, 2-5-1 to me is like, that's what all of jazz is based upon. Of course, it's not every jazz song like 2-5-1, but most of them have 2-5-1. But just like rock and roll is what 1-4-5. Those four, I'll play this for you real quick. So like. If you want. Like that, that's like rock and roll. That's 1-4-5. That's 1, the C going to the F, going to the G, going to the C. That's all that is. In jazz, if somebody said to me, play 2-5-1, we know right away that 2 is a minor, 5 is a major, 1 is a major. Although the 5 is actually dominant now because we're up to 3-part harmony. We've added that extra 7th in there. So, this, 2, 5, 1. All of a sudden it sounds like jazz. Right? So that you have it. Same chords, the same notes. Same notes.
So you said the add the 7. Do you always add the 7 from the 5?
Yeah, when you're in 3-part harmony, like we started triadically, which meant that we built the chords with 3 different notes, which, by the way, in order for it to be a chord, it has to be 3 different notes. 2 different notes doesn't make a chord. 3 different notes. When you add the extra third interval, it always becomes a seventh. So just like if you probably noticed, that was a C major 7, that's a D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7. B, if we added a seventh, would be a half diminished, but it's still a seventh. And then C back up.
So when you, let's say, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, would that be
Yes.
those?
Yes.
What do you call it?
Those 4 parts, that's
4 parts,
exactly
right,
right.
4
Yes,
parts.
exactly.
Okay.
So like if I'm playing that, the first chord, like, let's just say I'm playing, that's a C major 7, the C, the bass, the E, the tenor, alto on the G, soprano on the B. That's exactly what it is. Yep. And like I said, then each one will be its respective 7th chord. Don't even worry about the B diminished. It has a really long name, doesn't mean that much. It's a half diminished at that point. It's also a 7 flat 5, which you don't need to know. But it's still diatonic, because if we went on the diminished, it would be B, D, F, and then what? Right. And A is the 7th of that chord. And to go anywhere else with that, you just keep going up in thirds. Like a jazz musician might say, I'm going to play a 13, flat 9, something like, oh, what in the world is that? It's all based on this. It just keeps going. We haven't gotten to the upper extensions, because there's probably not enough hours in the day for that, but you already have the groundwork. That's how you could play respectable jazz tunes with this information right there. Just adding the 7 diatonically to each one of these. You can play 2 5-1s in any key you want to. They'll all sound good. So 2 5-1 being 2, dominant, 5, 1. Any questions about that? Yeah, you want to hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like this. This is B minor, E diminished. Yeah. It's got the 2 minor thirds in it. That's a minor third. That's a minor third. And that's the formula. I should write that down too. So. On a major chord, it's the interval of a major 3 and a minor third. And this, again, I'll keep repeating myself. This is only when you're in root position, which means that the chord that it's named after is the lowest note. So a major third, and then you have a minor 3 and a major 3, and this makes a minor chord. That's a minor chord, that's a major chord. And the next one, our friend here, that's called a diminished chord. And then our other friend that we learned right here on the 5, that's a dominant 7. And the reason it's called dominant 7th is when I was learning harmony, each one of these has a name, which I'm not going to bore you with. But this is the dominant right here. Right there, just like that's the leading tone chord, this is the dominant chord. So I'm hoping that what I'm really hoping for tonight is just to see all of these relationships. This is all this harmony stuff is all about relationship. How the notes relate to each other, what they sound like. If you play an instrument, I would strongly encourage you just to go ahead on the piano, just like Sophia did, and just, that's all you have to do all the way across. It's the easiest possible way for you to get those sounds into your head and into your heart, so that you can identify them. Identifying is really, really big. Like when you hear a song on the radio, you hear, maybe it's a song that starts like this. You know, can say, oh, it sounds like a minor chord, then it's great. That is great. And just to emphasize again, we started with what I called horizontal, right? And then we worked, and we made the vertical too. Because if I play, this is an A minor chord, if I went, it doesn't tell you anything. That's a vacuum, pretty much. This tells me a little more. Then this tells me even more. So it's all about what do you want it to sound, what does it sound like? That instead of just having a single note that's in a vacuum that you can use in a scale, when you're adding notes on top of it vertically, making harmony. Now, you don't always want to have harmony. Sometimes, like in a choir, we sing unison. That's a nice sound too. That's a lot of voices singing the same thing, exact same thing. But then when we go into the harmony part, that's when it gets complex and it just sounds beautiful. And you can actually, Pastor Steve Rivera did our team time yesterday. He was talking about that. It's like when you work together, every person has the thing that they need to be doing. And if you do it with the right attitude, the right mind, and you do it at the right time, it works with everything else. That's what harmony is. And I mean, that's what we call things harmonious, you know? It's nice. Harmony doesn't always have to be beautiful. I'm not trying to say that. But for our intents and purposes right now, it is. It's the inner workings of different notes and how they relate to each other. Okay, any questions? I would love to. No questions in your head. I don't, it could be just anything. Yes.
I'm sure you probably said this, but will you have this available so that, you know, I got here late, so I
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, we're videotaping it. Is there film in that camera? Oh no, we have to do it all over again. So. Yeah, I think it'll be. I think it'll be available. Yeah. And let me just leave you with a final thought about this. Is that this will not happen overnight. It took. I mean, for me personally, it took years and years and years for it to finally sink in. Not that that's gonna. You're ahead because. Hopefully, it's been explained to you in a way that it's no longer mystifying. What I'd like to do with any of this is demystify it, because there's nothing like surreal or unreal about it. It's just basically it's mathematics, but it's beautiful mathematics. It's just this will always yield this. It's not like all of a sudden I've invented this new chord. No, you won't. Somehow we can categorize it. Everything can be categorized. Okay, well thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.
If anybody has any time, we need to fold the chairs up if that's possible.
And also, this will be uploaded to our training channel on YouTube, so we'll send you the link. Also, there has been all these files of important
Yes,
information from
Dropbox,
the Dropbox,
yeah.
which
That's
you
to be-
shared, right?
Yes, well, maybe not to everybody here. Did everybody here get a Dropbox link? Okay, well, we'll send that to everybody too.
Yeah, we'll have that.
Yeah,
So-
and that has some of this material already on. It's just a little link that has some of my thoughts about chord construction, which we've covered here already, and chords and how they sound and all of that.
Did you do a session last?
Yes, yes.
Is that up there too?
Yeah, that one was, most people probably didn't know about, so I kind of, this is actually just like what I did last week.
Okay.
So,
And then there will be 4 more possibilities,
Yes.
right?
yeah.
And the next one is?
Next one's March 18th, and then the 25th. So it's the last